History of music research, broadly labeled as musicology, is more than 100 years long in European and North American intellectual thought. From its early beginnings as an academic field of study, it was recognized as an intersection of different approaches to music, roughly divided between historical and folkloric research, which were disciplinary and institutionally signified as musicology and comparative musicology or musical folklore, respectively ethnomusicology since 1950. Although in some academic contexts it is formed before ethnomusicology as its older sister discipline focused on dance, ethnochoreology also joined the arena of university study in many European countries, mostly after World War II. Regardless of their establishment as interlinked but separated scholarly fields, during the last 2 decades of the 20th century, each of academic disciplines have branched into many areas. This branching tendency increased in recent years of prevailing postmodern tendencies for particularization, interdisciplinary discussions, and establishment of transdisciplinary perspectives. Bifurcation seems to be immanent characteristics of all scholarly areas, including music and dance research in the beginning of the 21st century. Such a condition of, to paraphrase Timothy Rice's words, working within the vast plane of ethnomusicology's and ethnochoreology's disciplinarity, has to be confusing and disorienting factor for any scholar, especially those who should choose their individual research paths at the beginning of their careers. As a scholar basically trained in ethnomusicology focused on ethnochoreological research, I will try to discuss basic issues of those two sister disciplines influenced by diverse multidimensional challenges of contemporaneity. Starting from the short historical overview of disciplinary developing, especially within post-socialist realities after 2000, trying to reflexively reconsider distinctiveness of ethnomusicology's and ethnochoreology's disciplinarity, and finally leaning on the anthropologist Arjuna Padurai's theoretical concept of global flows, I will further try to consider how various modes of local and global socio-cultural processes influence our scholarly thinking and dealing with traditional music and dance. How do we draw disciplinary boundaries and reshape our scholarly identities while constantly adapting to new global and regional geopolitical circumstances which influences both public space and our professional and private lives? How do we cope with re-establishing overwhelmed requirements of academic work and permanent remodeling of available technological capabilities? No matter the fact that this talk will mostly express my personal reflexive account of practicing ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological research since mid-1990s, from the position, let me paraphrase Appadurai's words here, post-socialist subjectivity, the basic methodological approach would tend to polyvocality, including views and standpoints of the colleagues from Serbia and other former Yugoslavia countries. This tendency for discussing former and contemporary issues of our scholarly work more comprehensively is based on many interviews and questionnaires with fellow researchers, which I made during 2017 and 18 for the presentation and article originated from the symposium Music Matter, Ethnomusicology and its Socio-Political Relevance Today, which marked the inauguration of the ICTM Secretariat in Vienna. Experience of working on this, as well as discussions during the symposium and the publication which followed this event, influenced greatly to some thoughts expressed here. My standpoints were also influenced by presentations and discussions at the ICTM Study Group on Ethnochoreology Symposium held in Szeged in 2018, where one of the themes was devoted to dynamic and constitutive relationship between dance and politics. These two major recent events, coupled with intense and constant demands of academic work, influenced by COVID-19 measures of social distancing and physical isolation, melded my latest way of thinking and approaching reality. The opportunity to exchange immediate experiences of performing, transmitting, and researching dance in the conditions of physical separations with colleagues from all over the globe during the first virtual meeting of the ICTM study group on ethnochoreology, organized by Faculty of Music in Belgrade in late July, revealed new aspects of active remodeling of our fields caused by a corona pandemic, and consequently broadened my initial perspectives. Therefore, in this talk, I will try to generalize and in some points confront all various voices which shape my personal current view of what we do in our ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological research, how we do it, and why we do it at the first place. Ultimately, does it matter? For whom? Although scholarly research on traditional music and dance can be generally traced in national and romantic movements of previous historical periods, beginnings of disciplinary, grounded ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological work is inseparably linked with state institutions which all over Europe and the USA were formed mostly between world wars. Concretely, in Serbia and former Yugoslavia republics, newly established scholarly disciplines on traditional music and dance were formed and developed after 1945 under the ideological platforms and socio-political objectives of socialist regimes, which has already been broadly discussed in ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological writings. Ruling patterns of scholarly work were predominantly organized around research and preservation of ethnically distinctive local village traditions from previous times, considered as authentic representatives of national culture. Collecting efforts of recording the oldest forms of rural music and dances, basically influenced by ethnology and folkloristics, were followed by scientific approach to their investigation considered as particular texts, objectivized through notation. Methodological procedures and theoretical interpretations of structural formal aspects of both music and dance were greatly influenced by musicology and music theory. Turbulent breakup of former Yugoslavia during 1990s and the collapse of socialist system in 2000 in Serbia have resulted in attempts of establishing new democratic and market economy-based social order, which caused radical and comprehensive cultural transformations, including changes in prevailing ideology of scholarly activities. Shift in official policies of academic engagement inevitably influenced not only the position of ethnomusicologists and ethnochoreologists within the university and wider society, but also the wholeness of their work. Considering research activities, radical changes encompassed a broadening of the appropriate themes for investigation and fieldwork, appearing a variety of methodological orientations and theoretical preoccupations, and widening geography of international cooperation. The change in official politics of scholarly work and broadening of research possibilities after 2000 was heightened by a global shift in prevailing scholarly paradigm, generally signified in cultural theory as interpretative turn. A new perspectives in theoretical considerations of reality implied critical thinking, multiple interpretations, exploring role of personal experience and reflexive inquiries away from criticized positivism of scientifically oriented research. As Jeff Titan summarized it briefly, the interpretative turn in ethnomusicology implied move, and I'm quoting here, from science to cultural critique, from musical object to musical experience, from analysis to interpretation, from explanation to understanding. Shift in prevailing theoretical viewpoints consequently influenced methodology of field research and raised broad spectrum of identity issues both of scholars and, on the other side, research communities and individual musicians and dancers. Although interpretative turn spread through Anglo-Saxon ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology already in 1980s, in Serbian context it appeared not before 2010. Consequently, and initially, provoking understandable xenophobic hesitation, especially among older generation of scholars, including myself, no matter that I was in my 30s then. Not only in Serbia, changing scholarly paradigms challenged ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology with what Phil Bowman would call latest newness, and opened unrevealed forms of inter- and intradisciplinary conversations. Still under dominant financial support of the state in all professional distinctive activities, education, research, and various projects of applied character, and simultaneously pressured by keeping up with latest achievements in theoretical thinking on global transdisciplinary level, music and dance scholars in Serbia and the region are forced to make many compromises. Last 20 years, their research choices oscillate between nationally favored topics, such as aspects of safeguarding of traditional music and dance considered as intangible cultural heritage, and wide area of conceptual possibilities which constantly emerges from interdisciplinary permeations. Real financial possibilities for maintaining fieldwork which would extend state borders are still barely available, which inevitably affects the breadth of acquired knowledge. Apart from being heterogeneous and complex, remodeling processes continue, and they have been constantly reshaped under the new circumstances of ever-changing globalized world. Due to a spell of various circumstances that I entered the world of ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological approach to music and dance 30 years ago, first as a student in 1990 and then as a university teacher and scholar since 1997, I directly experienced broad transformations of our intellectual and educational fields. Exactly the same year when I enrolled university studies, Department of Musical Folklore within the Cathedra of Musicology and Musical Folklore was renamed to the Department of Ethnomusicology. Change of the name of discipline anticipated its internal fundamental shift from the so-called folk music research to broad spectrum of ethnomusicological inquiries, which slowly transformed our professional field in national context. Along with this concealed prediction, this administrative alter implied important transfiguration of the study program itself, because it marked the introduction of ethnochoreology as one of the main subjects of ethnomusicological study, and consequently gained it the status of university distinguished field of education and research. This seemingly mere administrative attachment to ethnomusicology meant much more. It reinforced their methodological and disciplinary mingling that are initially separated by the prime focus on research objects, music or dance. That firm institutional interconnection with music research directly influenced molding the concept and definition of dance as an inseparable unity of dance movements and dance music, which represents constitutive for national ethnochoreology last 20 years. However, it is not the case worldwide or even in the region. Although many dance scholars all over the globe are gathered within the oldest and most numerous section of the most spread and influential World Association of Ethnomusicologists, the International Council for Traditional Music, and that is its study group on ethnochoreology founded in 1962, there is no consensus upon the unique disciplinary field. No matter of their professional and institutional background, dance researchers diversely name their field studies as dance ethnology, dance ethnography, and mostly dance anthropology. Alternatively, some scholars position themselves in between, trying to, let me quote Anka Đurkescu here, find a theoretical framework in which ethnochoreological, aesthetic, analytical, and anthropological perspectives could be integrated. Within the one of well-established and long-standing worldwide scholarly group of dance researchers, the word ethnochoreology does appear as an umbrella expression which for more than 50 years continuously signify their various methodological and theoretical choices. Regardless of the fact that keeping the name can be regarded as a consequence of various historical circumstances within the ICTM and beyond, I want to argue here that this signification does not happen by accident, but that, if it is understood broadly enough, concept of ethnochoreology as globally distinguished scholarly field, no matter diverse institutional histories, has a potential for gathering together all diverse approaches to exploration of dance as a creative human activity. As it is the case with ethnochoreology, there is no single ultimate definition of ethnomusicology either. However, defining ethnomusicology occupied the attention of many scholars from its beginnings as an imperishable, let me use metaphorical expression coined by Bruno Nettel, harmless drudge. From theoretical presumptions of studying music in culture to studying music as culture, there have been continuously offered many definitions by many ethnomusicologists. One of the most accepted definitions last 20 years is nevertheless coined by Jeff Todd Titan, who concisely identified ethnomusicology from the point of contextually situated process of human activity as a study of people making music. Self-disciplinary reshaping from folk and so-called primitive music and dance research to ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology during second half of the 20th century, and in Serbian case during 1990s, implied the change of the naming of the object of research from folk to traditional music to musics, and from folk through traditional dance to a dance. As it is the case with the terms ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology themselves, the expression traditional still provoke controversy at various levels as the word that associates to criticized areas of positivistic approach to theoretical thinking prone to essentialism and outdated methodological procedures. Without the intention to discuss concept of tradition in cultural studies and its implication for reshaping ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological thought, especially in East European scholarship, from the point of view of a scholar educated and situated in a long-term continuity of well-grounded and recognizable scholarly disciplines, there could also be offered different interpretation. No matter of its unwanted associations, understanding of the concept of traditional as indexical verbal signification for historically situated orally and bodily transmitted music and dance based on immediate physical experience among performers can refer to any music and any dance in any context. It does not necessarily have to be understood as an adjective which narrow wideness of research possibilities of both genre-specific music and dance and human-made sounds and movements. On contrary, adjective traditional points on the historically and situationally generated processuality and, if you want, orality of music making and dancing. Simultaneously, sticking to terminological designation provides an ambiguous signification of disciplinary determinations, at least in national or regional contexts. Overcoming mere terminological interpretation, what determines ethnomusicology's and ethnochoreology's disciplinarities? What interlinks them? In summary, they are primarily local, community-based, thematically focused studies. In spite of some critical reflections as it is outdated, too narrow and too dividing approach, in the sake of clarity and pragmatic thinking, ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology's disciplinarities could be traced along three main axes: the object of research, methodological procedures based on fieldwork, which is their joint constitutive hallmark, and specific theoretical presumptions about both people making music and dance, and music and dance in or as culture. Striving to achieve balance between the study of music and dance as texts in specific contexts, or in Izali Zemcovsky's terms, the establishment of a synthetic paradigm of ethnomusicological research, is one of the distinctive features of both ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology in recent decades. Differences between so-called musicological or music-centered and anthropological approach to research, which have historically arisen as a consequence of various institutional backgrounds of national and regional schools of ethnomusicology and dance research, has already been critically discussed by many authors. As I already pointed out elsewhere, some scholars suggest that this division is politically exaggerated as one of the outcomes of the politicization of knowledge production during the Cold War in the 1960s and especially during 1970s. Leaning on Bruno Nettles and Timothy Rice's explorations, the areas of ethnomusicological investigations could be organized in several comprehensive groups. Without the intention to repeat them here, I would like to point out on a few general theoretical presumptions which interlink ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological investigation. The idea that music making is inseparable from the body has been pointed by many authors since the beginnings of ethnomusicology, along with the notion that playing an instrument is a physical activity. It could be added moving with the music, no matter how is it structured, is already dancing. On the other side, dance is inseparable form of dance movements and dance music, or in a general sense, musically organized sound. The so-called sensory turn, or what Brenda Farnell would call somatic revolution in scholarly discourses since 1990s and early 2000s, influenced appearance of new emphasis on embodiment of music making and somatic nature of musical and dance experience in ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology. These standpoints epistemologically and immanently connect ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology and open space for developing their common methodological procedures. Both disciplines are highly interdisciplinary, grounded by immanent processes of adopting various methodological and theoretical perspectives of ethnology, anthropology, linguistics, musicology, music theory, history, cultural studies, dance studies, psychology, as well as from each other. And for the sake of truth, ethnochoreology more from ethnomusicology than reverse, which is a consequence of institutional and educational historical circumstances and later adoption of ethnochoreological research within university contexts. Variety of theories about fundamental human matters from various scholarly disciplines, as well as from discursive fields of intellectual thoughts, among which are structuralism, semiotics, communication research, feminism, deconstruction, hermeneutics, performance studies, and post-colonial studies profoundly inform our disciplinary specific research and open new points of view about understanding of role and meaning of musics and a dance in the lives of individuals and communities. The latest seismic shifts, to use Martin Stokes' expression for the widening analytical approaches which influence disciplinary specific methodological procedures since 1990s, encompass focusing on performance situation, notion that music and dance are both historically produced and historically productive, and impact of psychology on musical and dance perception. The wideness of investigation opportunities is coupled by the fact that there is no single ethnomusicology nor ethnochoreology, since they are developing under, let me quote Svanibor Petan, politically, geographically, historically, demographically, economically, linguistically, religiously, and nevertheless culturally diverse national contexts. At the same time, and despite inevitable diversity, both of the scholarly studies are, let me repeat, already globally recognized. We have to be aware of our disciplinary specific achievements, which are irreplaceable, especially in the domain of music and dance as intangible cultural heritage. Due to the centrality of fieldwork in their research and producing both ideographic ethnographies and theoretical contemplations, ethnomusicologists and ethnochoreologists have always been the main actors for collecting, describing, analyzing, and understanding characteristics and role of music and dance, not only in the life of various groups and individuals around the globe, but in theories of how human in general came into being as social and cultural beings. Along our broadening understanding of music and dance in and as culture, as notions that might continue to generate productive questions, ethnomusicologists and ethnochoreologists, directly or indirectly, have an impact on musical and dance practice they investigate. The postmodern approach to field research, and to paraphrase Samuel Araújo here, postmodern modes of musical and dance ethnographies, imply assertive inclusivity with an awareness of the importance of the irreversible knowledge exchange of equals. As Samuel Araújo and Vincenzo Cambria argues, horizontal intercultural dialogue has high theoretical potential and may enable answering ontological and epistemological questions about music and dance and their social meanings. However, since that one of the most important notions of postmodern thinkers, among whom the most influential are Michel Foucault and Homi Bhabha, that a power is always unequal and decentered, and the general impossibility for achieving a perfect communication between two or more interlocutors is increased by unequal availability of technological means, the question arises as to whether this is possible not only in conditions of physical distance and the imperative of establishing new virtual communication, but in general. As distinctive fields of intellectual thoughts, which appeared and were initially developed in Anglo-Saxon scholarly traditions, disciplinarily specific theoretical starting point implicit for ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological research as a kind of a meta-theory about ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological scholarly distinctiveness is based on immanent irreversibility of a dual approach. Rhetorical apparatus of scientific investigation of music and dance, and optionality of their interpretative explanations. As Adelaida Reyes claims, dynamics of the oppositions embedded in prevailing research paradigms from scientific to interpretative provide, quote, a cohesive tension that supports the oneness and autonomy of ethnomusicology as a discipline that belongs to both of the fields that academia differentiates as the sciences and the humanistics. This constant interplay between basic epistemological orientations is the intrinsic quality of our research and conceptual overlapping fields which we should be aware of, concurrently open for new intellectual challenges. Ethnomusicologists and ethnochoreologists have to be unbounded in terms of intellectual sources, but they should keep trying to generate disciplinary distinctive methodological traits of both music and dance scientific investigation and interpretative theoretical contemplations. In other words, let us sustain ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology on both national and international global levels. Retaining general terminological appointment of ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology should not be simply understood as the matter of branding or the consequence of inability to reach consensus about an appropriate substitute. As for the verb traditional, sticking to terminological designations of ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology themselves should be at first place understood as a standpoint of keeping distinctive disciplinary specific intellectual traditions. Mark Slobin's words concisely and vividly express this attitude. Location is important for the intellectual GPS of one's readers. As eminently interdisciplinary fields of studies, ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology are continuously fed by knowledge and theoretical interpretations from other areas. According to ethnomusicologists Jeremy Woloch and Esther Clinton, but also dance researchers Karen Vedel and Petri Hopu, one of the most influential theses about the modern post-colonial globalized world, which greatly influenced ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological inquiries last 20 years, is Appadurai's theory of 5 dimensions of global flows or scapes that construct local and translocal cultural forms and determine dynamics of all social processes. Those are ethnoscape, mediascape, technoscape, financescape, and idioscape. The concept of a scape Appadurai uses as a perspectival construct which describes processes of imagining the world by both individuals and communities. For Appadurai, imagination is central to all forms of agency and is itself a social act. As a comprehensive contemplation advocating relational nature of being in the world, this theory has a potential for exploration the position of scholars as individuals and representatives of particular historically, linguistically, and politically situated fields of studies and intellectual thinking. Generally referring to the landscape of persons who constitute various communities on different scales, the ethnoscape is relational, variable, as well as shifting category. Our notions as members of the communities of ethnomusicologists and ethnochoreologists are situated in our national scholarly traditions, constantly influenced by the work of all other scapes, growing technological capabilities of technoscape, free flow of cultural forms mediated through mediascape, influence of local, national, regional, and global disposition of unpredictable financing conditions for all of our professional activities, and finally, but not lately, multidimensional stream of prevailing and alternative ideological orientations. This melting pot of historically generated circumstances influence relations between our professional and personal thinking and acting, which we should be aware of, advocating openly all our attitudes towards social and political realities, simultaneously crossing but also drawing various identity boundaries, including our disciplinary, national, and ethnic sense of belonging, according to our conscious decisions. The latest turbulent happenings caused by COVID-19 pandemic turned upside down all flows of social order on a global level. Within the conditions of propagated physical separation, communication in virtual space became the only option for mutual connections. Such historically unprecedented circumstances mark the beginning of a new era, not only in our private and professional lives, but in general. However, focusing on the consequences of ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological activities, there can be basically single out several major aspects of their inevitable transformations according to Apodorais flows. Not only fieldwork, but all other aspects of our scholarly work, teaching, research, symposium and conference exchange, festival and concert promotion have been adjusting to new situation. Considering perspective of a technoscape, we all have to learn and get used to use virtual platforms, and everyone has to adapt to new circumstances in technical and electronic terms. This conference is one of the early examples for this situation. We are all unfamiliar with this kind of communication, and recording a lecture in advance was challenging for myself, as well as was organizing virtual symposium of study group on ethnochoreology 2 months ago. The main reason in the first place why organizers of Young Musicology Conference invited us to pre-record our talks is that they wanted to avoid unexpected technical disturbances, which still are, I would say, not only inevitable part of the group meetings on internet, but they depend on the technical infrastructure of the hosting institution and the quality and optionality of the chosen platform, which is economically accessible for them. The abolition of funds for various project financing, including organizing virtual conferences, and the uncertainty of the economic future in global scopes raise issues related to the position of scholars in local university and academic circles, but also global network of academic knowledge exchange. In this situation, when the using internet is becoming the only way of mutual communication and research, there appears more than ever an open space for neoliberal, neocolonial repositioning of power, benefits, and availability of technological means and media visibility. Broadcasting music and dance online as almost only option of their public practice influenced broad transformation within the mediascape and raised numerous questions which refer to reconsideration of ontological and epistemological basis of ethnomusicology and ethnochoreology, since perceptual and sensory potentials of music and dance are changed in the conditions of unreliable, incongruous, and ill-matched screened transmissions. Making new joint musical videos of physically distanced performance not only opened new technological opportunities for making it, but became trademark for, I would say, globally shared at this very moment, ideoscape of optimistic solidarity. However, The multidimensional chain of shared ideas, terms, and images became more complex considering relationship over the pandemic, especially from the point of national ideologies and politics, where individual states establish control and absolute authority not only within its borders, but also around them by controlling the transfer of people and goods. Contrary to earlier general mobility of people all around the globe, the inviolability of state borders potentiates the renewed significance of bounded territories. It seems that this moment of history and the level of state ideologies generates new nationalisms which should not be confused with patriotic solidarity. This all certainly influenced the remodeling of ethnoscapes of various levels. Considering communities of ethnomusicologists and ethnochoreologists, despite isolation, fear of uncertainty, and awareness of their own reposition within local and global academic network, emerging circumstances could provide unexpected opportunities for reintegration between colleagues and, on the other side, generate conditions for a transparency of all data about music and dance as an imminent human need for expressive behavior. We should keep exceeding perceptual doubts, considering theoretical thinking and social acting through what Phil Bowman would call activist scholarship, which keep permanent balancing between them. Jeff Todd Titan's ideas of sustainability of music and dance and developing so-called eco-ethnomusicology are concordant to Tess Buckland's notions written almost 15 years ago that we all should keep trying to work on developing reflexive and dialogic strategies of our research choices and be aware of possible implications that our attitudes could have. I would say our ethnomusicological and ethnochoreological doing should be based on conscience and openly declared decisions. At the very end, I would like to conclude with pointing to theoretical contemplations of the philosopher Thomas Kuhn that crises created by anomaly finally lead to innovation and change of prevailing scholarly paradigms. The latest newness is ahead of us, and we all have to adjust to it.